BBC News, I'm John Shea. Aid workers in Ethiopia say 56 people have been killed by an airstrike on a camp for the displaced in the northern state of Tigray. While fighting on the ground between federal forces and Tigrayan rebels has halted, airstrikes have continued. A spokesman for the Tigray People's Liberation Front blames the government for the attack. Kalkedan Yebeltal has more details.
What we're hearing is what aid workers are telling news agencies, particularly Reuters, and they're saying that there has been an airstrike on Friday, and that airstrike was on a displacement camp, and 56 people actually have died and 30 more are wounded. We haven't been able to independently confirm that, but this incident is reported about the same time when the government in the capital announced that prominent political figures, including those from the Tigray region, are going to be released.
Lawyers for the tennis star Novak Djokovic say he had a vaccine exemption to come to Australia to defend his Open title after a COVID infection last month. The lawyers say his infection was confirmed by a PCR test on December the 16th. The next day, however, Djokovic tweeted photos of his maskless appearance at a ceremony in which he was honoured with his own Serbian postage stamps. The Speaker of the Serbian Parliament, Ivica Dačić, accused Australia of politicising the situation.
This situation will have consequences. For our relations with Australia, and the Australian authorities should be told that. Novak is not guilty of anything. Novak came to Australia after getting their approval to come. This kind of behaviour is shameful, and Australia needs to know that. Novak has a Serbian diplomatic passport. He's not just anybody. He's the world #1 tennis player and a legend.
More than 150,000 people have died in Britain within 28 days of a positive COVID test since the start of the pandemic. It's the first country in Western Europe to pass that threshold. Of European countries as a whole, only Russia has a worse total. Snow clearing machinery has been deployed by the Pakistani military to free hundreds of cars trapped on roads during deadly blizzards around the town of Muri. Sahar Baloch reports.
Around 23,000 cars drove up to the hill station of Murree to witness the heaviest snowfall in decades. But blizzard conditions turned the narrow roads into a death trap. 9 children were among the 21 people who died after being stranded inside their cars after the weather worsened. Many suffocated, poisoned by carbon monoxide as they tried to keep warm. Military rescue efforts only started Saturday morning. There are also questions about government inaction. Up until last night, it had been praising the influx of tourists, which was deemed to be of benefit to the struggling tourism industry.
This is the latest world news from the BBC. More residents of Kazakhstan's main city, Almaty, are beginning to venture out into the streets after a flaring of violent unrest earlier this week. But a BBC correspondent there says Almaty is still far from normal and gunshots can be heard. The arrest of the former head of domestic intelligence on suspicion of high treason has fuelled speculation that at least some of the violence may be linked to a power struggle within the ruling party. Iran has imposed sanctions on a number of Americans, many from the military, over the killing 2 years ago of the military commander Qasem Soleimani. In a largely symbolic gesture, 51 Americans have been targeted for what the Iranian Foreign Ministry calls terrorism and human rights violations. Police in Albania have used tear gas and water cannon to disperse hundreds of protesters as a power struggle within the main opposition party turned violent. Supporters of the leader of one faction, a former president and prime minister, Sali Berisha, smashed their way into the headquarters of the Democratic Party in Tirana. The new James Webb Space Telescope has fully deployed in space, the final step of its 2-week deployment phase by NASA, which began with its launch on Christmas Day. Jonathan Amos reports.
This is step lead on ops. We have reached the end of deployment and we are preloading into the launch pads.
The telemetry from James Webb came down to Earth from more than 500,000 miles away. It confirmed the 3 sections making up the mirror were in position. Webb is by far the most expensive space science experiment ever sent to orbit, but also one of the riskiest. Because it had to be flat-packed for launch, there were real fears that the complex series of later deployments might falter, but none did, and the telescope will soon be able to begin its quest to capture images of the earliest stars and galaxies to form just after the Big Bang.
And that's the latest BBC News.